Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. It's true. Today, I am pleased to present two people who have played a very big part in my life, yet from a long distance. And some of that may be true for some of the audience as well. This one's very personal for me, and I could not be more excited to share it with you guys. And I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. To the audience, first, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I'm a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones, and ask questions of our speakers. And also, this is very important. Please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want
Right.
to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, I could not continue to do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and my favorite industry podcast, Unlimited Supply. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my friend and alumnus of this platform, David Gans. David is a multifaceted figure in Grateful Dead culture, a working musician, journalist, and author whose career has bridged all three roles for decades. Born in LA, David started out as a musician in 1970, playing guitar and writing songs around the San Francisco Bay Area before shifting into music journalism. He wrote for BAM Magazine and Jan Wenner's Record and served as music editor of Mix Magazine, which gave him access to major musicians and producers. He's co-author of Playing in the Band, an oral and visual portrait of the Grateful Dead, a book credited with introducing thousands of fans to the band's deeper history at a time when good books on the Dead were rare. He later co-authored This Is All a Dream We Dreamed with Blair Jackson, along with several other titles, including a Jim Marshall photo collection. He's also producer and host of the nationally syndicated Grateful Dead Hour and co-hosts Sirius XM's Tales from the Golden Road with Gary Lambert. As a performer, he tours as David Gans and the Broken Angels, blending original songs with Dead covers, a project Phil Lesh once sat in, with reportedly inspiring the idea for Lesh's very own Phil and Friends. Welcome back, David. It is such an honor to have you back with us today.
It's great to be back and particularly to get to talk to Charlie Miller. So tell us about Charlie.
And joining David as today's featured guest today is Charlie Miller. Charlie is a near mythic figure with Grateful Dead tape trading circles, revered for taping shows himself, and even more for the painstaking archival work he's done restoring and remastering other collectors' recordings. He's best known for his Matrix mixes, blending pristine soundboard audio with audience tapes to capture both technical clarity and the atmosphere of being in the room. Work that tape traders routinely rank among the finest sounding Dead recordings in circulation, alongside the legendary Betty boards. He's also unearthed decades buried sources, including a 41-year-old tape of the April 23rd, 1977 Springfield show, which he finally released digitally and credited properly to the original taper. Community tributes describe him as unusually generous and humble for someone of his stature, combining a genuine reverence for the music with technical mastery of audio restoration. He remains active in the scene, continuing to surface new remasters, and has appeared on Grateful Dead focused podcasts and radio programs discussing his process and history. It is beyond my pleasure to welcome these two heroes to our platform today. Take it away, boys.
Hello.
Damn.
That's quite
Uh,
an intro.
I don't know how to live up to that.
Well, I just want to say hi to a bunch of people I notice in the attending here. Lots of old friends and my Stanford students, and lots of your friends and fans as well, Charlie.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me that we're here in a forum that's oriented toward the music industry, since we have spent most of our lives outside the mainstream music industry. And now we're watching the mainstream music industry come around to our way of doing things. Because the Grateful Dead kind of invented viral marketing by allowing guys like you to tape the shows and circulate them, and built themselves into an immense culture that is now recognized all the way up to, gosh, NPR is doing a whole thing on us this week. So, what are your thoughts on how the hell we got here?
Some, that's an easy question. No, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around this whole thing of kind of like how I ask myself, how did I get here? I kind of, 'cause people always ask me, and you've asked me, and I ask myself, how did I get here? How did all this happen? But you know, there was some people. I mean, okay, let's go back. In 1967, I recently got an audience recording of the first Grateful Dead audience tape, and it's been in circulation, but I got a better copy and I've been working on it. And I'm pretty sure it's the first audience recording by a non-band taper, and it's the Hollywood Bowl from September 15th, 1967. And, and then people just started, I guess people had the idea, hey, we can tape these shows and no one's going to stop us. And through trading in the late 70s, I started getting these recordings, and I don't know why, but something made me feel like I would actually be able to do it and do it well. I had no experience or anything, and and I just figured I can do it. And taping has changed, with the whole taper section thing. Because before the taper section, you can pretty much set up anywhere, and it's those people um, throughout the 70s who were doing that. Like Jerry Moore is a great example. Jerry Moore's recordings from 74. That's kind of what got me into the Grateful Dead, and Bob Wagner and Robert Trando, and of course our mutual friend Bob Menke, who I just got off the phone with. All those people made these tapes, and it just kind of grew. But isn't it crazy how big it got? I mean,
It just the whole thing is insane, but I think we should sort of go back to the reason why it happens in the first place, and that's because the Grateful Dead played a different show every time
yes,
they performed, and that is different from the way most of the music business has operated over the years. Traditionally, when I spent 10 years as a music journalist from 76 to 86, covering that industry and talking to producers and record company presidents and artists and all. And the whole model in those days was that a band would make a record and they would put the record out and then they would tour to support the record. Touring meant people would go buy a ticket and go to the show, hear the music, then they would go to a record store and buy the record.
yeah,
That worked for years and years and years, and then the technology and various cultural things happened, and people stopped buying music, and now they get their music on streaming services that don't pay a goddamn thing to the artists. And so
that's a
the way
shame.
that artists make money in the industry now is to perform. And
Yeah,
so, whereas in the past, the record would come out and the tour was to support the record, now the tour is how people make their money, and the record is a calling card for that. I remember a
mhm.
moment 20 some years ago when Prince came to town and played at the Oakland Coliseum, and everybody who went to the show got a copy of the album, which is an inversion of the way the system always worked. And
That's crazy.
it is, but it turns out that what we were doing all this time was a successful way of marketing music. We invented it. The Grateful Dead were smart enough to acknowledge it and embrace it, and now the rest of the world is coming around to that.
That when String Cheese Incident first came on the scene. I heard about them in the like 97 or so, and I was told from my taper friends, hey, there's a band and they will let you tape their shows to patch off the board. And they were given John O'Leary was giving these board patches every night, and it was the best advertising because of all the music circulating, these great recordings. They just blew up, you know. And I think that that really helped with the Grateful Dead, you know, because it was advertising.
Certain people in
Yeah.
that world appreciated that and embraced it, and other people didn't, of course, you know.
Yeah. I can
There was also,
imagine. I can imagine. Yeah.
yeah. Well, but it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of it came out of Jerry's mentality. But let's get back to you. I think we really want to talk to you about this stuff. How did you become the go-to guy for all of this? Tom asked me before we started. I don't remember exactly when we met. You just sort of became this a name that was attached to all these tapes going by, and then your profile kind of grew and grew, and now you're the guy. As soon as I hear about something interesting coming along, I shoot it to you because you sort of became the guy, the nexus of all of these things. When tape collections are unearthed, who do we call? We call Charlie. When Don Pearson's collection of masters, I don't know how you got hold of that stuff, but I mean, let's talk about how you became this full chromatic character.
You know, I won tickets. Getting back to your question, how you and I had first met, or I had won tickets on your radio show, coincidentally, and it was you were opening up for the Zen Tricksters, who, when I lived on Long Island, that was my local Grateful Dead cover band. I used to see them, you know, for years, and you had given me tickets, a pair of tickets to see the show at the Great American Music Hall. And after your set, I think it was, you came up to the balcony and you said you saw my microphones and you asked if I had taped it, and I said I taped part of your set. And you asked for the tape, so I gave you the master, and you mailed it back to me with a CD of 10/12/68. Uh, the little note on it that said this is a drummer's choice or something, like what does Bobby say
Oh, it
before
was
that?
the dog story. This is a foxtrot, and it's
Yeah,
also a lady's choice.
yeah,
That's right.
that's it. That's
That
it. And
was
that
we
was the
taped
little
that off a
comment on it.
K-San in 1976.
Yeah. So you sent me that, and I started, you know, I started getting into your music because that was my first exposure to your music, and I'm like, oh man, this shit is great. And I just started doing a bunch of your shows, and then when I started working for Steve Kimmock 25 years ago, uh, our lives really intersected because you were doing a lot of stuff with that. With, you know, when Kimmock was in town, you would promote his shows, and you had us in the studio performing one time in 2004, I think it was 2005, something like that. And so yeah, man, you know, it was your music and Grateful Dead that brought us together. As far as the whole thing with the tapes, working once again, working for Steve brought me working with everybody from the Grateful Dead except for Jerry Garcia. He was the only person I never got to work with. But I had got to work with everybody, and I got to meet everybody, and just with talking to people, um, you know, they would give me their tapes or let me at least digitize them and copy them, and that just opened doors. And without mentioning any names, I was just lucky to be the guy that ended up with Don Pearson's collection. You know, unfortunately, his wife threw away a few boxes of his
Wow.
tapes after. The story I heard was that she was having trouble coping with him being gone, and she wanted to get rid of some of his stuff.
Oh,
And that's why I don't have soundboards to June '83, you know, because
right.
Don taped everything. He had a deck off the board for all the shows, you know, and so the first part of his collection was missing. So it really, when I got his tapes, it kind of started at 1985.
Hmm.
But
I,
well, you know,
there's another aspect to this thing that you have touched on here, and that is that this whole thing emanates from a desire to share the joy. I interviewed the Odie brothers in 2007. And those two guys, they're legendary names for people who collect these tapes and follow the Grateful Dead. They are a pair of brothers from Georgia, one of whom was an audio professional. And they became fans of the Grateful Dead and started taping the shows. And their entire impulse for doing it was that they wanted to capture the ecstasy of the experience of going to a Grateful Dead show and share it with other people. And that, to me, the founding impulse of this whole thing is that the idea that we're celebrating together and we want to share these things. I have encountered other tape collectors and traders who were not nearly as generous in their impulses. There were times 25, 30 years ago when somebody would call me up and offer me a tape, but demand something back from me that I wasn't able to give them. When I was getting tapes out of the vault, my rule was if I got it from the vault, it wasn't mine to trade until after I played it on the radio. Once it was on the air, it was fair game, right? But I couldn't give you a tape that I had gotten from the vault because it wasn't mine to trade. The other side of that philosophy was that if I didn't get it out of the vault, it wasn't mine to withhold. So I would freely
That's a
share the things that
good
came from
point.
other places. But there were people in the taping culture who treated it as more of a hoarding thing, as a horse trading thing, and they wanted, it was a less generous impulse, is what I'm saying. So but I think the overall attitude among most of the people that I know in this culture is that we all have these ecstatic experiences and we want to share them. We want to evangelize it to people. And I think the tapes have been like the primary calling card for the entire Grateful Dead culture for all these years. And also keeping the music first.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky that like we have. I mean, the Odie brothers are making the best recordings. I just love their 85s are just phenomenal recordings, and they work really well when you need to use them to patch a tape flip on a soundboard too. But we have people like Joni Walker, who was making phenomenal audience recordings in 1978. As a matter of fact, Paul Scotton told me that her first recording that she made was from 1971 at Gaelic Park, which next time I see him, I'm going to have to get those tapes. But Joni was making great tapes in 78 and 79. And after the next day, she would give Healy, Dan Healy, copies of the recording. And he liked them so much, he started letting her put her microphone stand in the sound booth and not have to hide it and having full access to be able to tape from the best spot. And her audience recordings from that era are some of my favorite tapes. They just have such a nice sound. I mean, it wasn't like she had studio professional microphones. She was using some Sonys, which were pretty good, but she had the right spot and she knew how to make a tape, which is important. A lot of people have great gear and don't know how to make a tape, but and December 26, 1981, at Set Break, Healy went up to her and offered her a board patch. And the rest is history with her. And we got all those tapes, and those are the tapes that I would get when I was, living in New York. They would work their way to the East Coast, and I just thought this was the coolest thing ever.
Amazing.
It is. It's.
And why did Ely? I've heard from various times that he had relationships with different tapers and stuff. He was interested in. I remember Owsley. He talked about recording the shows as records of his work. He's thought he
Exactly.
calls them Bear's Sonic Journals. But so was Dan listening to find out how his work was coming across into the tapes? Is that why he was interested?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like this way. It's a good documentation of how your mix sounds. But and Bear's recordings, I'm shocked at how good the technology was back then. Just because you don't think that 1967 or 66 even is going to have as good of a technology as it did, because some of the stuff that he did is just phenomenal. The newly remastered recording that they put out from was it July 3rd, 1966?
Yeah.
That is just the sound on that is unreal.
Well,
And
Jerry Bear's whole thing was mic placement, going
yeah,
back to the recordings that he made, the Old and the Way album that came out in like 1975. That was like four mics on a stage, right? But he knew exactly where to put them. And he talked about that all the time, that he understood that the whole purpose of the sound reinforcement was transparency.
yeah.
And you want the whole thing to sound good in the house, and where you put your mics was, how you got the clarity of the recording. And obviously, looking at what's coming out of his archive, he knew exactly what he was doing. And you could get a optimal recording with a very small number of mics if you know where to put them. But yeah, there's a lot of people that had no technical knowledge at all. And that leads me to ask you, you have been getting educated since you started doing that. Your own knowledge and technical abilities have increased exponentially. So how have you yourself improved your abilities as an engineer?
Well, I learned, basically, I got lucky working with Grateful Dead crew, and because that's the sound that I always wanted to get when I did sound or worked on a recording. I just wanted to make it sound like a Grateful Dead concert, and because that was my favorite sound ever. It was just so warm, and I when Ramrod's kid Rudson took over as Kimmock sound guy, I would shadow him, and he taught me how the basics about getting a room to sound good. And Howard Danchek from ultrasound taught me how to really dial in a mix and without having phase issues, and even taught me about PA setup and the technical side of thing, which kind of changed the way I tape a little bit, because I now look at a PA differently because of this PA speaker management and how things are aimed and what is meant for what. But the I always had this thrive to just make things sound better. It was never good enough for me. I just always wanted to be better, and which kind of get a little frustrating sometimes, because I can make a great recording and still think it could be better. But it's just, oh, I would always ask people when I was started taping and started doing sound. I'd always ask people questions, and I was very eager to learn. And I actually listened to what they were saying. I didn't just listen to their answer and be like, "Oh, I know better." I mean, I thought there was a lot of really talented people out there, like the Odie brothers. Great example on how you can use multiple microphones at a show and not have a phase problem because of how they set things up and the patterns that they used, and mixing a pair of hypercardioid capsules with a pair of omni capsules, and just various things like that.
Again, the generosity of these people sharing their techniques, and
Yeah.
the idea was so everybody could hear this music. A couple people want to know, yeah, Richard Hewitt wants to hear if you could walk us through what exactly you do with the tape. For example, the 79 soundboards that are at the incorrect speed. When you get a tape, what do you do with it? How do you bring a recording of unknown provenance up to presentable quality?
Well, okay, so if there's a recording, not just from 79, but if there's a recording and it's an analog recording, odds are it's not going to be on pitch, even if basically if the record deck and the playback deck are not at the 100% exact same speed pitch, you're going to have some fluctuation. So what I would do is, first thing is, I would look to see, is there a copy in circulation that's already been confirmed to be on pitch, and then I can match it to that. Or with Don Pearson's tapes, the shows from the 90s, we have digital recordings of those, which a digital recording is going to be on pitch,
Right.
because digital, it's perfect pitch. So I would match it to that. It's gotten to the point where I can look at a song that I know is on pitch, and then one that I have to check and look at the difference, and I can just know by looking at it, oh, that's a half a percent. Or
Interesting.
yeah, it is. it's kind of crazy.
I've often wondered how you manage to do that. I'm a musician, and when I'm adjusting the pitch, I actually hold a tuning fork in one ear and listen to the music in the other ear. And I pick a song of a known key, where I know that it's a key that relates to the tuning fork, like I have an A and an E tuning fork. And I've just used my ear to do that.
That's
Um,
that's awesome.
uh,
Ariel's got our friend Ariel. She's got perfect pitch. She's like one of those few people that can hear, oh, wait, that's just and she's not really good at helping me get things perfect. She can just tell me, this needs to be adjusted. I was at Kim Ock's house between shows on a tour once, and I had some Grateful Dead tapes that I knew needed to be adjusted. And the last thing that Steve Kimmock wants to do is sit around and help me pitch correct my Grateful Dead tapes. So I started a conversation with him discussing pitch and variable pitch things and whatever. And I started playing some things and without him knowing it just and with the questions I was asking and his responses, I was able to get something to be on pitch. Kind of cheated there a little bit, but I have two people that help me, Mike Babiak and Joby Jones. What we did was we got Joby Jones a Tascam media player. Plays CDs, SD cards, or compact flash, or a thumb drive. And on the front, it's got a little dial where you can adjust the playback pitch in
wow.
tenth of. I have one too, actually.
In digital?
Yeah, and it's tenth of a percent intervals up to plus or minus 16%. So you can just
Wow.
keep turning it a tenth of a percent. So what I'll do is I'll send MP3s to Joby Jones, and he's a bass player.
Yeah.
He's got perfect pitch. And what he'll do is he'll play along to the recording, and if he has to bend the string to get the note, my tape is off pitch. So
Right.
he'll adjust it on the recorder until he doesn't have to bend the string to get the note, and he'll send me the settings, and I'll do the corrections.
What a separate a hardware device. That's not a
It's a
plug-in.
Tascam CD player that also actually it's a Tascam CD recorder, rack mounted.
With a
Um,
variable pitch in digital domain.
in
All
digital
right.
domain. And one
That may be
time,
that's interesting.
this actually the CDs that were discussed at the beginning of this, the 42377 Springfield, which
Uh,
by the way, that was one of my first audience tapes I got back in like 1978 or so. I love that show. Um, I sent MP3s of that to Joby Jones, and he sent it back telling me what the correction was. So I put it into the CD player, made the correction, and then played it and outputted it digitally to another Tascam, which captured it. And I did it in real time as opposed to doing it with software. Software does it through sample rate conversion, and I do know that it can be it's kind of a destructive process, but it's for those people like that are really really fine tuned picky about what things are done to the recordings, and resampling is not always the best thing for recordings, but it's necessary. And of course, it's better to have something that's on pitch. So what I did was I played the CD at the correct pitch and then captured it on another recorder. Which
there's a piece called app called Reaper that a lot of audio
yeah
professionals use, and that's where I can do some pitch shifting. But I love the idea of a hardware device that you can adjust. That would
yeah
So, but that's a little far afield from our conversation here.
yes.
Going back for a minute, Tom Truitt was wondering how many people got board patches back in the day.
Well, okay, so these are the ones that I know about. I mean, I know the crew is getting them, and Don Pearson and Howard Danchek and all the other guys from Ultrasound. I assume they all had theirs because I know Don did. So I assume if Don did, the other guys there did. I knew Ramrod was getting him and Candace was getting him, and then Healy was also making his own tapes. But for the non-band slash crew people, I know that there was one guy, what was his name, Andre, who did a audio. He was at some audio, some what was it, some convention or something with Rob Eaton, and Dan Healy was there, and Andre hooked up with Dan and got a board patch with a reel to reel at 12179 Stanley Theater, which was the CC Rider bust out. Um, and yeah, the Rob was smart. Rob Eaton was there with his Knock 550 and said, "Hey, you guys should let me patch my Knock 550 cassette deck as a backup." So Rob got cassette masters too, which he had sent me. Joni did, and there were a lot of people. I know there's a few people that were just friends that
Oh yeah, I know of two others. I don't want to mention specific names, but
exactly.
I
I was
know
just
of two
gonna,
people that were
yeah.
personal friends that were able to bring theirs. I was a little bummed at times because I had a contract with the Grateful Dead that entitled me to play their music on the radio, and I couldn't get a board patch.
Yeah,
I
that
had to
makes
wait
no
till the band
sense.
was out of town, and then Dick Latval and I would go in the vault and copy five things at once, just so I could get a bunch of stuff done while
That's awesome.
the crew would be, everybody was fucking around with this and that. So it was just easier to get work done when there wasn't anybody around to harass
Oh,
us.
absolutely.
But it was always an adventure trying to get hold of a good quality tape.
Look, Bob Wagner told me about a guy because I these were some of my first tapes also, and now it's great that I have the backstory to it. But Bob Wagner had a friend who used to get Dan Healy high. Leave it at that. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know. It's just the story I heard, and he got board patches to some of the tapes, which is funny because all these shows have since been released. One was 92576 at the Capitol Center in Landover. Um, One was 51977 at Fox Theater. Oh, and one that wasn't released, 8476 Roosevelt Stadium. So Bob Wagner copied all of these cassette masters right after the shows, and it's from his reel to reels that we had gotten those copies throughout, before the digital age came and took over everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that we're gonna get? Oh, Tom was curious about how you make a living doing this.
I don't
My
make a
business
living doing this.
don't make a living
People,
doing
so
this.
people seem to think, okay, so if you're online, and I mean, I've been called a celebrity with a W, not an L, celebrity, which is kind of funny because you're not a celebrity, you're a celebrity. People know you on the web, or some people have
I've
called
never
me
heard
an
that word before.
yeah, it's celebrity, and I also get called an influencer. I'm like, don't let me influence you in any way, please. But and people assume that since my name is all over the internet and a million people know me, that that I randomly get these checks from the internet every month. But no, I work for Steve Kimmock, and for the last 4 years, Steve has been playing with other people's bands. And those people's bands have their own crew and don't need his crew. So I've been doing stuff like, with the Kimmock download service that we started on Kimmock.com, and the downloads we do at Nugs. I've been working kind of on that. But basically, for the last 4 years, I've been somewhat retired. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But no, I don't make money. I don't make money mastering Grateful Dead tapes. Every now and then, somebody will be like, they'll send me $50 for my electric bill. Which I think is funny because of all the hard drive. I was copying a bunch of hard drives at the time. But on this recent fish tour, I actually made $700 with people coming up to me and just handing me $100 bills, shaking my hand, and just thanking me profusely for all of the music. One guy heard about it and he wanted to top them, and he gave me $200 at Meriwether Post Pavilion, which was pretty wild. It's a little embarrassing, but it's also kind of expensive flying around picking up tapes from people to work on and shipping stuff back and forth and buying gear and maintenance for the gear. So I that's why I actually accept the money. But yeah, I do not make money doing what I do. It's kind of a labor of love. I'm kind of doing it for me because I want to have the best copies of the shows to listen to. And 99% of the time, I'm not told, don't put it out, don't put it out. It's like, it's okay for me to share this stuff. So I've been sharing it. But yeah, it's truly a labor of love.
Well, it's and an entirely worthwhile one. Somebody wanted to know if you ever snuck a deck into a show
Yes,
yourself, and how
yes,
did
yes,
that go?
yes, yes.
What was
Okay.
your technique?
So in 1978, my sister and I went to go see the rock band Boston at Nassau Coliseum, and we brought in a recorder, and I was like 35th row on the floor, standing there holding it up. But so that was my first tape. But no, with the Grateful Dead, when I started taping, it was kind of if you get your stuff in, you can do what you want. So I used to hide the deck, just to get through the door. But when I started taping Jerry Garcia, the
Which
first
was
time
strictly forbidden.
strictly
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 forbidden.
forbidden. Was it Parrish that was used to threaten to cut Bob Mankey's microphone cables or slap him
Probably sounds
upside the
like
head or what?
Candelario.
Oh, that was kid, yeah. So I was able to get in December '89. We had no problem getting the gear in the first two nights, those two nights, and then we came back in February of 1990 for the next shows. I used to live a block from the Warfield, so for those shows we showed up and there was a mobile recording truck outside. And I looked at my taper partner. I was like, "This is not going to be easy," and it wasn't. I had trouble that run, but so I bought a D6 because it was easier to get in, and I started sneaking it in every night. And I'd be coming in, and they'd be saying, we know you got a D5 in your, we know you got this, I'm like, I swear to you, I do not have a D5 with me, and I do not have these, which I didn't. I didn't have a D5. I had a D6, but and they would just they knew I had it, and they just couldn't find it, and I would sit front row balcony. I would get GA tickets, and I'd find the people at the front row balcony seats, and I would trade them so they can be on the floor, and I would literally sit right next to John Cutler, and I had a stereo bar for my mic stand that was kind of it was like this, and then it went out like that, so you could put your mics there. When you
Right.
flipped it over, it fit right onto the armrest, over the armrest at the Warfield, and we would bring a pen and wrap some tape around it instead of bringing in a whole roll of tape, and we'd tape it down, and we'd kind of put a shirt so you couldn't see it, and I used to wear the microphone cables as a belt, and I used to sneak the tapes in because they would never open up the tape case. They would look at. I had a Cyndi Lauper tape, and if you opened it up, it had a blank Maxell in there, and the other tape was in the deck. And it's one time at the Greek Theater in 1990, they were really being vicious on the search, and I was like, "There's just no way I'm going to get my gear in." And my friend had this little Walkman that had a record button on it. So we put it in his duffel bag that he had with him. We put it right on top, so when they opened it, they would see it. And he was in front of me, and the next line over, and they opened it and they saw it, and they're like, "Recorder!" And all the security swarmed over, and I just went through the exile without being searched. It was it was stuff like that. But yeah, taping Garcia was difficult. It was very stressful, but I
Yeah.
kind of I kind of got away with it dozens and dozens of times.
It's fascinating to me. I mean, we should mention some of you out in the audience there might not realize that the Grateful Dead had a very, very different attitude about taping. The Garcia band had an attitude against taping. Steve Parrish and John Cutler were primarily responsible for running that scene.
Yes,
And
yeah.
neither of them was at all sympathetic to what Charlie and the rest of us were up to. So it was strictly forbidden. But I'm going to tell a story about John Cutler now that all of you will find very amusing. During the Jerry on Broadway run at the Lunt-Fontanne Theater in New York, a legit Broadway theater where the union rules are very, very strong, John was not allowed to record the Garcia shows there. Yet he did. Here's how he did it. just like all the rest of us. He'd set up his deck, get his levels during sound check, and then he shoved the deck way up under the console so nobody could see it. So he started the tape before the band took the stage, and he wouldn't reach under to stop the tape until after. So he was just stuck with whatever levels he got. And I got to go through all of those tapes. In 2003, I was hired by the Garcia estate to put together the bonus material for a box set called All Good Things, Jerry Garcia studio sessions. And I went through every bit of multi-track tape in Jerry's archive. And also along the way, I got all of those DATs of the Broadway run. I forget why I had them, but I went through them. And one of the things was I had to make copies of them for somebody. And one or two of them were not usable because for some reason the levels were just way too low. He set it and couldn't look at it to check, so a couple of them were unusable. But I just think it's just ironic and really amusing that John Cutler himself made illegal bootleg tapes of Jerry Garcia shows in one particular stretch of time.
That is hilarious. We were at we're at a venue, and I was doing sound for Chemox and a venue in New York, and they wouldn't let me record our show. I said, "It's our band. We can record our own music." They're like, "No, we're afraid you're going to make an album. You can record it if you pay us a $500 fee,
Right.
just in case." And I'm like, "Well, so if we don't release it, we're out $500." They're like, "Yeah." So I convinced them to just let me run a pair of room mics. So it won't be usable, just a pair of room mics. And they said, okay. So it's a small stage. I put the mics right in front of the band. But at that point, you got no vocals. So I'm running everything, I'm wiring the stage. And I took the two vocal mics and I asked the house sound guy, I go, what channels do I put these in on the house snake? And he told me like 17 and 18. So I took the microphones, I routed them through two open channels on my recorder. And then for my recorder, I did the 17 and 18. So at that point, I had the mics on stage and I had the vocals. I had everything. And I was able to do a mix that sounds so good. And yeah, I mean, don't tell me we can't record our own music. It's Steve Kimmock's music. He can record and they were just afraid we're going to make a live album. It's like, really? You know?
It's the mentality is really something. I played a gig in Alabama at a club, and the kid running the sound refused to let me plug my tape deck in. He said, "This is my stage, this is my sound, and you don't get to record me." And I was like furious. I don't know why I didn't just tell the guy, "Fuck you, I'm not going to play the gig if I can't record my own show." But I acceded to this kid. It was just obnoxious. It was like, how dare you not let me record my performance? The sound guy's job is to put the music across, right?
Right.
Anyway, there are people in this world who are insanely possessive of things. Tom wants me to ask you in front of everybody if you take Venmo because I think there is more than one person who would like to send you some money. Just
Um,
do it, Charlie.
it's
Hey,
on my phone and I'm on my phone talking to you
let me see if I can find it in my address book.
at Charlie Miller 87.
Oh, let's see if there's a Charlie Miller 87.
And by the way, can I quickly tell you about the 87?
Do, yes.
It's 25 years ago. I'm signing up for Earthlink and I'm listening to like one of the most amazing nights of my life. This recording is 32687 Hartford, which is David Lemieux's first show. And it was my first post-coma show. And Jerry was just so animated. It was the greatest thing. And I was listening to this recording and I just was so moved by it. And I'm signing up for Earthlink. And the woman on the phone said, what name? I said, make it my email, Charlie Miller. And she said, well, there's already a Charlie Miller. She goes, pick a number. And I'm like, 87. So that 87 is my tribute to Jerry Garcia and how he
Oh,
came back in such great shape in 19. I mean, it was just the band. Gotta take a little detour here. The band wasn't doing the longest jams, but in 1987, it was so nice to see Jerry just so happy and so alive. And I remember that night at Hartford when it came to do the drum segment. the most of the band sat on the side of the stage on stage left, and watched. They didn't like go run backstage and do their thing. It was like Jerry was there, and there's a few. I think Bobby was there, and Phil was there for most of it. But I thought that was one of the coolest things. Just that we got Jerry back, and
That's nice. Jerry 87. It turns out your Venmo is at Charlie Miller 87. I was
oh,
looking, I searched for Charlie Miller and found 30 of them, but you're listed under Charles Miller, so it didn't show up on my search.
oh
So
yeah.
there you go, friends. If you want to Venmo some money to Charlie, he's Charlie Miller 87.
Oh, you guys are, that's really sweet of you. Thank you. It's I struggle with it. I was homeless a lot in the late 90s, and I you know got caught up in doing some heroin because there was no more Grateful Dead, and I wasn't messed up enough, so I figured let's get more messed up. And the way I survived was sitting on the street, in the financial district with a cup in my hand, very politely asking people for spare change. And if they said no, I was like, well, great, have a nice day. I wasn't all yelling at them like some people do. So when I got clean, and I had an opportunity where people would offer me money, I had a hard time with it. It's super embarrassing. Um, but it is what it is.
You got to get over that stuff. I play for tips every day on my daily live streams,
You're
and
talented. You have a talent. You're a musician. You're a songwriter. You're a multi talented individual, and I feel like you deserve it more than me.
no, 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 no.
You know?
To each according to his needs is how
Yeah.
the true socialists behave. I mean,
Yeah.
I play for tips, and I'm offering a discount on my online store today and all that stuff. But
Yeah. Can
you
you tell
know,
us about that?
no, this is
Okay.
about you today.
Okay.
Tom has posted in there about my discount offer. We're talking about you today.
Okay.
Any further questions from the house out there? I haven't seen anything. Oh yeah, if somebody wanted to know, Kevin wanted to know what percentage of Grateful Dead shows have been recorded. I'm only aware of a handful that weren't on one level or another,
So
right?
1967, when Bear wasn't working with the band, the way Mike Dolgushkin describes it is perfect. It's almost as if anything that was recorded in 1967 was done by accident because there's so few shows. And if it weren't for Bear, if it weren't for Bear, we would be missing a lot of Grateful Dead. I do know that I mean, people. Well, there's a show from January or February 70. No, oh yeah, February 6th, 1979, the Tulsa
Tulsa,
show. Yeah,
right?
people said, "Oh, Jerry was all messed up," and said they didn't record that night. Yeah, I mean, I can't. Dan Healy's not going to run a tape because Jerry's high. You know, as for that would make no sense. But people always that's this rumor that the band didn't record it because Jerry was. What was it, Valiums or some shit was the story, and one of the books that came out describes the story about Jerry being taking too much of something that brought him down, and but to the best of my knowledge, everything got recorded except for
Well,
1967.
well, there are tapes missing from 1970, I think, when Bear was in
Oh,
jail
that's
and had
right, when
everybody
Bear was in
skipping stuff.
jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And which
We should also talk about the definitions of various forms of tape because a lot of people don't understand the reason why the Betty boards are so spectacular and why a lot of shows from say the early 80s sound weird because they're sound reinforcement tapes and stuff. So let's talk
oh,
a little bit about the definitions of different forms of recording here.
the best example is Robbie Eaton gave me two copies of I think it was 625/78 Eugene or 64. It was either 64 or 620, one of those two shows. I think it's 625. So he gave me a DAT that was from Betty's Cassette Master, and he gave me a DAT that was from Dan Healy's Cassette Master. And the difference is Dan Healy's recording is a board mix, which is a mix for the venue,
Right,
the stadium, which or the room. And Betty has got headphones on and she's mixing for the recording, which is
right.
completely different, which is why I do what I do with the recording with Kimma, because kind of have to compensate for things. And a Betty board is going to sound so much better than a board tape, you know. And Betty was recording like she was recording to half track reels on a Nagra, and a lot of them were 15 inches per second, and that's going to sound as good as it gets, you know. And I was asking Rob Eaton recently, why does 1977 sound so different than 1976? And you know, and he said he spoke to Betty about it, and she said that Dan Healy started using a spring reverb, so she started using a spring reverb, and which is why if you listen on Barton Hall when Bobby's talking, it's got that big roomy reverby sound, and then it'll kind of go away because she had a spring reverb, which I never knew about. You know,
That's a
but and then so then when ultrasound took over as the sound company, the recordings also changed. Like in 1987, the end of 86, Dan Healy came up with the thing that the ultrasound guys were doing. It was the ultra matrix, where they had a stereo microphone which was actually mid side, where the figure, let me see if I get this right. The figure eight was pointed at the stage, the Omni was side to side, and the Omni I think was flipped out of phase. Is I think that was the one. And it was the mid side was decoded to stereo and then mixed with the board feed, and that would give you the Ultra Matrix. And Dan Healy said his whole reasoning for doing it was he was trying to make it sound like what he was hearing from, you know, where he stood.
right. Because the board feed is too dry. It doesn't have
It
enough of the
is.
sound of the room.
Yeah.
And the room mics are too don't are aren't articulate enough because they don't have the
Yep.
close up thing. So you combine the two, you get the closeness of the board feed and the ambience of the room feed, and you mix them in together. There were in the early days of the Ultramatrix, they had to dial in the time delay just perfectly. And
Yeah.
there were a few tapes where that didn't happen. The
Yes.
time I'm aware of those was
Yes.
the December 86 run, right? When she's
Yep.
coming back from Jerry's coma. And I remember getting hold of one of those shows, and the board and house were just so far out of sync you couldn't use it.
Flat
But they
back.
eventually got that dialed in, and I remember there's one particular one, I think it's one of the 88 Greek theater shows where the Ultramatrix is dialed in just so absolutely perfectly that it's like
Yeah. Yep.
standing on stage.
Yeah. That is a good one. The I got in Don's collection, there was a couple of the 4-track betas, which I know you know about.
Yeah,
And what they would do is they would record the four channels used to make an Ultra Matrix. They would record it as two stereo tracks where the soundboard went onto the video track, which was PCM, so you have a digital soundboard. And
right.
on the tape, the audio track was the ambient mics. And I would transfer these using two recorders, and I would put them in samplitude, and they were so lined up. I mean, this was like by 88 or 89. So, you know, they had really, really got that stuff figured out. I know that in the beginning there was too much audience. They were way audience heavy because Dan Healy made it a 50-50 mix where the mics and the board were set the same, but a mic is going to have the RMS is going to have way more power, and you're not going to hear the board as clearly. And Steve Marcus from Grateful Dead Ticket Sales pointed out to Dan that the microphones were too loud. And this was during the 1987 fall tour at the Madison Square Garden. And he said Dan Healy just reached over and lowered the mics. So it was more of a 75% soundboard, 25% mics. And I think those are some of the most fantastic recordings. My favorite one is Alpine Valley from 1989. When I was transferring Don's tapes, I was going in chronological order, and I was listening to the Standing on the Moon from July 17th, 1989 at Alpine, and I started to cry. I just felt like it sounded like I was there. It actually sounded like I was like, you know, like a couple of rows in front of the soundboard, just listening to the PA. It had such a wonderful natural sound to it.
Just as an aside, John Blaufarb just mentioned the Orpheum run in '76 and how great that broadcast was the night before, July 17th, '76. An amazing show. I wanted to
Yeah.
make one more point about soundboard recordings before we move on, and we are starting to run out of time.
Ruh-roh.
Soundboard recordings are, as Charlie mentioned earlier, sound reinforcement. They are recordings of what went through the sound system to the people in the house. And that meant that it's compensating. The sound that's coming off the stage goes directly to people's ears, and the sound system is bringing up things like vocals that can't be
Yep.
heard acoustically without reinforcement. But what goes into the mix going into the house is compensating for what's on stage. And there were stretches in the early 80s where Jerry was playing his guitar so loud that it barely needed to be in the PA at all. So the
Yes.
recordings of those shows Jerry's sound in the recording is weak because it was so loud in the room. That explains why there are certain recordings of certain eras where the balances aren't as good as we'd like them to be because they are recordings of sound reinforcement mixes, not recordings purpose made like the Betty boards were. In
Absolutely.
later years, when they're playing stadiums, everything had to be in the PA. So the soundboard recordings are pretty well balanced because they reflect what was the entirely balanced thing that was being fed into a stadium sound system.
That's like when I mix Steve Kimmock, sometimes his guitar is so loud on stage, like you were just saying, like Jerry in May '84 and July of '84 at the Greek Theater, you don't really have to put him in the PA. And when I record Steve, I have two channels on my board mix, my house mix, and the other two channels are a pair of mics on stage. So once again, the stage volume and the board, they even each other out because what's loud on stage is not loud in the PA, and you just find the perfect balance, and it gives it a really nice live sound.
That also brings to mind another story. I was once sitting next to Harry Popick was mixing sound for the Jerry Garcia band at the Keystone Berkeley. Those of you who don't know, the Keystone Berkeley was a tiny little club, maybe 300 people, and it was like a concrete shoebox. It was an acoustical nightmare. But I'm sitting with Harry and the band is playing, and he points to the mixing console, and the channel on the mixer for Jerry's guitar is down to zero. Jerry was playing so fucking loud that everything else he had to bring up to compensate for
Was
it.
that like '81 or something? '82
I
maybe?
probably around there, yeah, very
Yeah,
early '80s. That one when I would have been hanging
yeah, that's crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know if we have any more questions from the floor. Anybody have a comment or question
Oh,
they want to?
can I throw something out there? I wanted to
Please
talk
do.
about the Matrix thing and the Ultra
Oh yeah,
Matrix.
yeah. People want to know about Matrix recordings.
So the Grateful Dead tapes, I don't make the matrices with the Grateful Dead tapes, but there's people who take all of my sources and then they make them because my theory is an Ultra Matrix was made with the microphones were placed and aimed with the absolute intention with mixing it with the soundboard.
Yeah.
Taking a soundboard and let's just say my audience recording from a random show and mixing them together, it's not natural because one, I know people time align the analog, but you never get it truly perfect. In my
No.
ear, I hear the drift. And also, you're mixing microphones that were aimed never with the intention, not with the, they were aimed not with the intention of mixing it with the board or anything for that matter. So you're taking two sources, and sometimes they do work out, but the majority of those, I just feel it's not a natural thing. But
I agree.
I do
And
make the
so many
matrices
of
with Kim
them, it is
Mocker.
impossible to time align something at those sample rates. It is impossible to keep things from separate sources in sync. And I very rarely hear one of those Matrix recordings that I think really is an improvement because of that. There's an inevitable smear between the two signals, and you just can't get them perfectly in sync unless they were recorded in perfect sync to begin with, which is what we were talking about.
Exactly. I have to be on the same clock.
Yep.
Yep.
On the same clock. That's exactly right.
Yep.
People are already asking for an encore. I don't know, people. What do you
I'm
think of Graham Lesh and the Terrapin Family Band? They've scratched some itches for Brian Zisk.
So I worked with Graham once at the Summer of Love event at in Golden Gate Park that Roger McNamee put on in 2017. Graham was playing a song or two with Steve Kimmock. You know, it was a whole bunch of different musicians. And while they were on stage during the sound check, kind of figuring things out, I got to meet Graham and talk to him briefly, and he was really nice. You know, he seems like a really genuinely nice guy, and he seems to me like he's about the music, and that's the most important thing for me. People ask me why, you know, why I do so much. It's like I'm in it for the music, man. I'm in it for the music, and I find that there's some musicians that I don't think are in it for the music, but this isn't about that. And I just think that you know, I think he's got a good future ahead of him. That's for sure. You
He
know,
seems to be carrying on his old man's tradition like
that's awesome.
pretty solidly. Yeah, that's kind of
You know,
great.
Phil was about the jams. And we learned this more than ever after the Grateful Dead. You know, the Phil and Friends shows, like the ones with Kimmock, some of the songs were like 40, 45 minutes long. There's just jams. And I love that stuff. It was
Yeah.
he was about the jams.
I, as a musician, I am a direct descendant of the Grateful Dead, and I live for that shit, man.
Yeah.
The jamming is the thing, and I've had an amazing summer already. I played 4 gigs in Chicago with a bunch of my favorite Chicago musicians, and I just came home from Atlanta where I got to play a set with a bunch of my favorite Georgia musicians.
That's
And that
awesome.
whole thing, just being able to jam, we all speak this language. And we can get
That's
up on
great.
stage. I got to do that with Phil Lesh a couple times in late '97. He came and played with my band, the Broken Angels. And there are some people that think that's where he got the idea for Phil and
Oh,
Friends, because
absolutely.
I was putting bands
Absolutely.
together to play this music. And
Yeah.
in '97, I played a regular gig in Berkeley where I put together a different band every week. And Phil came and saw us do that at the Ashkenaz in September of '97. And I remember standing at the back of the floor with him and my wife, and he's watching a bunch of musicians on stage playing Grateful Dead music. It was like you could see the light bulb going off over his head. This is he was like mind blown. I said, well, first of all, multiply this by about 10,000, and you'll know how we felt standing in back watching you play.
Wow.
And then he was getting it that this was a musical language and that he could, because then after we had this conversation, he got up on stage with us and played a couple of songs with us. Bob Brayla was in the band, and he saw that you could just step up on stage and play that music with the people who know the language. And I've been doing it ever since. I mean, it's just the greatest thing. You can step up onto a stage with people you've never met before, and because we know the songs and we understand that it is a language of mutuality and of sharing and of generosity. And as I put it, everybody has the power to dominate the rap and the good grace not to. That you can make magical things happen by listening to each other and playing sympathetically. And there's a great quote from Don Was. You don't have a minute to look it up, but he said something in an interview with me for the Grateful Dead Hour a couple of weeks ago. He said, after I'd spent some time working with Bobby Weir, and when I started with working with him, he said, I'm going to learn a lot about fearlessness, and I'm going to take that and apply it to my entire life, he said. And I just love that
That's
what
awesome, dude. That's
Bobby taught
beautiful.
Don Was, who's, like a fucking giant of the music
Yeah,
industry,
he is.
the rest of the music industry, and for him to walk into our world, comprehend it so beautifully, and to take exactly the right lessons from it and bring that out into his life. I feel the same way. I've been playing Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead's way of making music is how I play it with musicians playing my own songs as well, right? And I feel like the Grateful Dead did teach us all how to be improvisational humans.
That's awesome. Oh, you know what? I never did mention one thing. A lot of people have been asking me, where are my fish recordings from this summer? I just got home a couple of days ago and I promise I will get them out. So I saw the time was running short, and I didn't want to forget to say that I will get them out soon. I'm working. I've got a few of them done, and as soon as I get the whole tour done, I'll post it so you can download the whole tour with one link, just one click, and it'll all be there.
Now, people have been asking about that. What is your process? You record the thing on a device, and then what do you do to get it out onto the archive?
I record on a. I've been using some AKG condenser mics, 460s, this past few years. I've been happy with how they come out. And recording on a Sound Devices 744T for like 20 years. The thing was industry standard when I got it. You know, NFL Films uses it. You can park a truck on it. And I've done over 2,000 shows, or yeah, over 2,000 shows in 20 years. And it's never failed me. So I throw it into Samplitude, and usually there's not much I need to do with those. I usually just kind of get, it's always balanced because I'm always in the center, and I always have a good spot to tape from for the most part. But I usually just make sure the levels are where they need to be. You know, they're not too low and not too loud, and they're a lot easier to work on than the Grateful Dead stuff because they're digital. So I don't have to deal with any flips. I don't have to deal with any hiss or any pitch issues, and it does make things a lot easier. But every now and then there's sometimes you just got to run like a high pass, like a very very slight high pass at like 26 hertz, very minor, where you think you're not going to notice it, but you can really see the difference in the waveform. Sometimes there's a little wind or something
Rumble
that
from the air conditioning and stuff like
or
that?
or yeah, mainly Madison Square Garden. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I never run windscreens indoors, and I had to run a bunch of years ago, my first time at the garden for fish. I had to run a B&H photo video the next day and buy windscreens because they like blast in that AC right where I'm at. And I
Oh,
bring it,
God.
I'm like wearing a jacket in July. But so I have really nice windscreens that do a great job, but sometimes it's just a little windy and you got to clean some stuff up.
Right.
But
My
I
late
don't
brother. Oh, go ahead.
I don't like to generally EQ my recordings, because if I'm going to EQ it, I'm going to EQ it for my room, and I'm the only person here who's listening to it. I leave that to the listener to mostly do it. And hey, I just saw a name pop up, a guy named Ken Mintz.
Yeah.
And Ken Mintz, I met him in 1980, and he is responsible for starting my Grateful Dead tape collection. He
Huh.
also is responsible for taking me to the March 9th and 10th, 1981 Madison Square Garden shows. Thanks a lot,
Wow.
Ken. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He taught me a lot of what I learned about taping and tape trading came from Ken. So, hey, bro.
So he wanted to ask about recording at the Sphere. Now, the Sphere was an entirely novel musical audio
Wow.
environment, right? Did you
Yeah,
record at the Sphere?
that was okay. So I held fish with their taper section locations and layouts, and because they know that I know what a band is thinking, because I work for a band, and I'm a production person, but I also know they also know I'm thinking about what's good for the tapers. So I find that happy medium there. Dead and Company put people underneath the overhang all the way in the back. So you're recording, you can't even see that. You couldn't even, yeah. So you're underneath a balcony, like way underneath a balcony. And for fish, I recommended they put us at front of house. So we're right next to front of house. And where do you point your microphones when there's 165,000 drivers behind a wall? I mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I kind of I am friends with the guy that is the venue archivist, and he tells me where he goes for, and I use that kind of as a, well, I'm going to do this and do that. And I used to have the seat directly next to front of house for fish at the Sphere, but when you're in those seats, right behind you is the owner's box. James Dolan, I think his name is,
Right.
and those people are they're rude just because they're in the owner's box. They would yell at people's microphones, spill alcohol on tapers and shit. So I asked the band to put me on the other side of the row, and which they did, and it's some of the best recordings. It's really nice. It's really nice. I think the recordings came out really good this year. I think honestly, I think the sound at the Sphere this go around was better than it was 2 years ago because Fish had figured out how to do things properly. Not that they didn't the first time, but they really nailed it the second time. And I can honestly say that was one of the greatest 3 weeks of my life, taping that whole run there. Um,
That's
yeah, I can't help but smile thinking about it, man. It was just magical. 9 nights, no repeats, just, yeah. It sounded so good. I was literally standing there in tears at Separate the first night because it just sounded so insane, and it hits you right in here. It's just so beautiful.
you
Um,
know, we got to wrap this up, but I have to say, I feel like you and I are missionaries in a way. But I've been for more than 40 years, I've been playing Grateful Dead music on the radio for free. And one of my favorite things in life these days is when I meet somebody who says, I'm a Deadhead because of you.
yeah.
Because I was listening to WNEW one night and there was that music and I fell in love with it. And my first answer to them is always, well, I hope your parents have forgiven me. But I feel like you and I and the Odie brothers and Bob Wagner and Bertrand, all these tapers, our mission was to share this joy and to get
Yep.
more people to appreciate this thing that we love so much. So, Charlie, on behalf of everybody in this room, I want to thank you and congratulate you for accomplishing that mission so well.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. I started recording the Grateful Dead Hour on WNEW had a thing tonight. The Grateful Dead Hour will be starting, and I'm like, oh, it's probably just them playing stuff off of like albums. So I didn't pay attention to it. And one day I heard the preview for 9/18/87, which I was at, and I was like, oh shit, I got to start listening. So I was able to receive the Grateful Dead Hour the day before it was broadcast on WNEW. It was broadcast in Connecticut. And I can kind of hear it enough to know where I had to flip my tape the next day when I recorded it off at WNEW. So it was my little Grateful Dead Hour sound check. It was,
That's great. Ron King
yeah,
mentions Hartford WHCN 102.5.
yes,
They were my first.
yes, that's
They,
it.
I started doing the K-Fog Deadhead Hour in February of '85, and I took over responsibility for the show later that year. And WHCN was the first station that called me and asked if they could carry the show as well. And I had no intention. I had no idea it was even something I could do. I just started doing the Deadhead Hour on K-Fog for the hell of it, for the fun of it, for the music of it. And then I started getting calls from other stations, and HCN picked up the show. That's how I accidentally became a syndicated radio show. I mean, I'm still doing it all
How
these years later.
crazy is that it's still
It,
going? It's
yeah,
just
and there was a
amazing.
classic rock station in San Diego.
Yeah.
Like everything else that I do, it's become less lucrative over time. It's harder and harder to make money in radio, just like it's harder and harder to make money in music. But anyway, yeah, it's just been I have led an improvised life. In fact, I put out a book of my stories and photos called Improvised Lives because the Grateful Dead inspired me to follow my nose into great adventures, and here I am still doing it years later. So
That's
lucky
just
us,
awesome.
right?
Yeah. Music never stops. Or
By
as
the way,
as a
anybody out there who's interested, I'm always looking for a sponsor for my radio show. So if anybody wants to support the Grateful Dead, the syndicated Grateful Dead Hour, I'm always looking for sponsors. I collected one a few years ago when I did one of these for Tom. So if anybody's interested in supporting the Grateful Dead Hour so I can keep doing it, please contact me and we'll talk. And there's also a tip jar at my online store, perfectible.net. But our main focus here is Charlie, so please direct your Venmos to Charlie Miller 87, please.
Thank you very much. And there's an announcement going on outside. Hold on. There we go. Sorry about
We
that.
don't hear it. We're not hearing it.
Oh, good, good, good. I live across the street from an elementary school, and they're opening up next week, so it's kind of loud. but it's all good.
You got it. All good.
Gentlemen, I hate to cut this off. I could literally listen to this for the next, 5 years of my life. But truth be told, I've been listening to music that both of you have your fingerprints all over for the last 40 years of my life. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of not only the people that are here today, but legions of other Dead fans out there who have benefited from the hard work of both of you. Thank you.
It's a
Right on,
pleasure
man.
and a privilege. That's what I
Yeah,
always tell people.
exactly.
How lucky
Yeah.
are we that we get to do this with each other?
Amen.
How lucky are we that these tapes keep popping up? You would think that we would have, by now, but it's just, yeah, and I do need to mention, since I do get asked quite a bit, I absolutely love Play Dead. That app is
Yes,
awesome. They did it right. The sound quality is phenomenal. It's high resolution. And
I agree.
I fully endorse that. It's a dream come true,
I
man.
agree. And that, by the way, is another entirely Deadhead operated business. You know, Brad Serling got into the whole thing so that he could share his Dead tapes. And Dave Glasser, who's doing all the mastering for Play Dead, is also a big Deadhead. We've been friends for years. So yeah, it's that I totally endorse Play Dead as well. Brad's going to be my a guest with us on Tales this coming Sunday. If anybody's interested, we're going to catch up with
Awesome.
him on how it's going. So thank you, everybody. It's been a delight and a pleasure, and I hope
Thank
maybe
you.
Tom will have us back to do chapter two of this.
Oh,
That would
Garen,
be, I'd love it. I'm down.
you're in. You're in. I can't wait. Thank you
Oh,
again, gentlemen.
and
You
one more
guys
thing
are
before we
just
sign off. I'm teaching a class for Stanford Continuing Studies, and next one starts on September 29th, and it's going to focus on the music and life of Bob Weir, and it opens for registration on August 17th at continuingstudies.stanford.edu.
Oh, and I'm doing
gonna type that in.
a Grateful Dead dance party in Charlotte on August 29th between 9 p.m. and midnight. And for the life of me, I can't remember the location right now. It's on my Facebook page. So
How about bring one of those to Nashville, Charlie?
yeah, I would love to. You and I will talk more about that, but yeah, I would love to.
You have a free
Yeah,
place
we
to
talked
stay.
about doing multimedia things where there'd be live talk and
Yeah,
maybe.
I wanted to get David involved in it. I think it would be really cool if it was not just me, but it was me and David. And I just think there's a lot of opportunities for this to be a cool thing.
We
All
can
right.
talk to you about that offline, Tom.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, thank you again for all the great work. Please live
You guys
long
have a
and
great
prosper.
day.
Thank you,
Take care,
everybody.
folks.
Bye.